Hey, welcome to Gradwell, a limited series podcast that explores various ways the University of Michigan can support its graduate students in their journey to greater well-being in our everyday lives. Brought to you by Rackham Graduate School. This season, we'll be talking to members of our academic community whose research intersects various dimensions of well-being. I'm Sam Hobson, a PhD candidate and a GSSA in Rackham's Professional Development and Engagement Office. My fellow grad students, it's time we start placing as much importance on ourselves as we do our work. You're worth the effort.
The relationships that you build in these spaces are actually the ones who construct your path.
Today's resource is Dr. Terra Molengraff, Program Director of First Generation Initiatives in the Office of Academic and Multicultural Initiatives here at Michigan. Today, we will be highlighting the research Terra and colleagues did to write the book, Decoding the Academy, a roadmap for first-generation college students through graduate education, to explore the intersection of professional and social well-being. I am super excited to have y'all with Terra and me today. Okay, we're going to jump in. So, Dr. Terra Molengraff is the Program Director of First Generation Initiatives at the University of Michigan. She graduated with her PhD from the University of Minnesota's Organizational Leadership Policy and Development Graduate Program. Her research focuses on how colleges and universities support first-gen college students, with an emphasis on institutional change agents and organizational change. As a first-gen college student, Terra's work now supports first-gen students and focuses on the intersections of the first-gen identity and how the structures of higher education can be changed to support students. Hi, Terra. I am so excited to have you here with me today. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here as well.
Wonderful. Okay, so to get started, how did you get into this academic focus?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I am the first person in my family to attend and graduate from a four-year institution and pretty much college overall, the first person in my family overall. And I've always really loved thinking about and looking at how structures, organizations, institutions are created or structured to support people generally. And then as I got into undergrad, I started to focus more on education. How is education accessible? The first few years of undergrad, I met a friend who was a first generation college student, and I basically just did exactly what she did. It's very, very common in the first gen experience to find somebody who did the thing that you want to do and just try to follow them through. And that's kind of what happened.
That makes sense. It does. What was the research that you and your colleagues did for first gen students and first gen college students? And why study this at all?
My dissertation work is focused on how colleges and universities support first-gen students from an organizational level. So many of these structures were created, higher education institutions were created without first-gen students in mind. They just aren't structured to really support that group of people. So there are built-in inherent challenges and barriers. And I really wanted to look at them, the barriers, name them, figure out how we can do well, to support these students. And in that process, my academic advisor or my research, dissertation advisor, Roshni Jahangir at Minnesota was really doing a lot of different projects about supporting first-gen students in different kind of facets. And one of the things that we realized in the research that there's very little research about first-generation college students who enter into graduate school or who are now in graduate school. This doesn't include students whose parents only got undergraduate degrees and then went to grad school. It is just the students whose parents have never experienced college. And so there's very, very limited research. For undergraduate students, the challenges and barriers that they experience as first gens, we know about them. But as students go into graduate school, it is even less structured than undergrad. There are more discipline-specific pieces of knowledge that you have to know that sometimes no one tells you. There is its own book of hidden curriculum of how to navigate through graduate school. And the experience of a first gen student in grad school is entirely dependent on what they experienced in their undergrad, was their undergrad research-based, not research-based, and then also what they want to do after grad school. So if you enter into grad school, some students, might not know that there's a pretty specific trajectory that's either faculty or not faculty. And sometimes students who are first gen don't know that that is a, kind of disaggregation or kind of separation. And so they might enter into grad school and be like, I went to grad school because I'm trying to get a job, where some grad programs are not really, they're more research based, they're not as practice based. But they don't always describe that in ways that make a lot of sense. And so we
Hmm.
wanted to do this research on first gen students and their experience because we wanted to name these pieces and to draw attention to the fact that graduate schools, a lot of them have this expectation that once a student has completed their undergraduate education, that they should be good. Like they understand how college works, they should be fine in grad school. And that is not true. And there's still a lot of support that is required because of all of these, structures and policies that are very specific to graduate school that no one tells you about until you're there. And unless you have people around you to explain those things, you are just dropped in the ocean and you're trying to just kind of like figure out, not even just getting used to your classes, but it's everything, right? It's like a whole new environment, very different expectations.
Tara, that sounds like a lot. I just feel like it sounds like a really complicated web that first generation students have to navigate on top of the complicated web that is graduate school already. And so I know that we'll get into, well, what can we do about it later? But just so to ease people's minds right now, what was it like for you? How did you make it through?
I made it through because of the people. I was in a master's program before my PhD program and had very different levels of support in my master's program versus my PhD program. And so my PhD program, my advisor she like wanted to get to know me. She spent a lot of time knowing what I valued, kind of what I was hoping to get out of it. She invested a lot of time and energy in our relationship. And then the people that I was around, I found other first gen students who were just a couple years ahead of me, who I was able to ask all of my questions to. And because I had gone into a master's program prior to the PhD, I had much clearer questions to ask. Before I went to my PhD program, a part of my job, my full time job, was working with grad students to do mentorship with undergrads. And as I was applying to graduate school, I was supervising this group of graduate students and I was telling them that I was going to graduate school. And they were like, we would like to give you a list of all the questions you should ask. And I was
Mm.
ask like when? And they were like, when you go to visit day, what you should ask your advisor, what you should ask the program director to see if there are supports there. And it
Mm.
was like a list of 30 questions from these 5 graduate students. And they were like, ask them all, and how they decide to answer, what the answers are, that will help you decide. The questions were very specific, which is so helpful around funding, around the expectations of students, how we are expected to do research, like all of these really intricate pieces that are really important to know before you enter into graduate school or choose like a graduate program. But that nobody, like I would have just gone there and been like, the vibes are good. Like I'm going to go, which is, is a way. It's a way. But you really do want to know if you're going to be forced to find funding every summer. And it never
Yeah.
occurred to me to ask for that. And so after undergrad, I think it was the experience of naming that I didn't know what I didn't know, right? Being like, I'm not sure how this works. And then also studying and the experience of being first gen and higher education and through my education, I started to realize that I had a right to be able to ask all these questions. And it didn't reflect on me as if I was someone who shouldn't be here because I didn't know the answers. It reflected on the institution for not telling me in the first place, right? So a lot of times I felt like early in my undergrad career and even my first grad program, I was like, I don't want to ask these questions because I don't want people to look at me like I shouldn't be here. And as I went into my PhD program, I was like, it doesn't matter.
I am so glad that you had such great support, that you had people that tell you, like, here are the questions that you need to ask. And also, you need to be asking questions. That idea at all, I know, is frightening and can be scary to accept. That is a very, like, sort of important part of graduate school. I'm really glad that you were able to find people to help you decode the academy, if one could say. And so, with that being said, what is necessary for grad students to know when they're trying to decode the academy?
Yeah, I think this information is relevant to all grad students. I think it's especially relevant for first generation college students now in graduate school. And it is that relationships are the most important piece the most important thing you can invest your time in. And in the research, one of the themes that we focused on was relationship building and how first-gen grad students do that with peers, how they do that with faculty, how they do that with staff on campus, and how they do that with their advisors. The environment of grad school was never constructed for first-generation college students. It was constructed for people who had parents who are doctors or lawyers or PhDs, and it hasn't shifted that much. There are some more accessible online programs, different schools do different things, but it was really constructed with a particular student in mind that is not a first-generation college student. The students who we talked to, they continuously talked about the networks that they built from undergrad, from their jobs, from their communities, like their home communities, that served as a support and helped them navigate through graduate school. And this can be like more interpersonally, like just being supported in terms of your mental health, in terms of just like being, okay at a baseline. And then there were, supports who were faculty, right? Sometimes if their faculty at their institution that they were at in grad school maybe weren't helpful or maybe not as accessible, they would call or email their undergrad faculty that they had closer relationships with, and they would talk them through it. And so the piece that I really want to highlight is that there are many different types of ways to be supportive, right? And so I think it's like an environment of support that is built with multiple people. And that is, when I talk to grad students, that is the thing that I say. I'm like, spend your time. If you're new here, spend your time just meeting people, because that is how you're going to make it through.
Something that you said that stood out to me was that our relationships need to serve multiple purposes, and how perhaps our relationships that are connected to our institution may not serve us in every way, particularly in ways that are outside of the institution or outside of our professional journey. For instance, like you said, your home support might remind you, like, have you eaten today? And that might not ever come up if we talk to just the people in the institution, which makes me feel a little sad, but also but it also, I guess, makes sense that there's a focus in our relationships that are connected to our institution. And so it is very important to diversify all of our relationships so that sort of all of our self can be filled and be tended to. To think that we could perhaps fill all of ourselves with just our relationships that are connected to our institution might feel a little lacking, but we may not know why that's happening, because maybe we have a lot of relationships, but maybe they're all interconnected with our department and our field and graduate school in general. And then my brain is spinning right now. Yeah.
One of the things I'll say, one of our participants, she actively sought out a therapist who was a woman of color, not in the institution, so not in counseling services or anything like that, because she needed somebody who was not embedded in academia to just like keep her grounded in what her values were. And it was really important for her to seek that outside of the institution. And so graduate students have limited resources, but sometimes within the institution, you just can't find those spaces, or sometimes they're kind of hidden away or kind of in, kind of niche groups. But you have to prioritize what you need and understand, like, it is, for grad students, it is your responsibility to get through the experience of graduate school. In undergrad, I feel like they're like trying to get you through. They're like, you will graduate. In grad school, they're like, you could hang out here for years and be fine. And it's like, if you're first gen, you may also be low income. So time is money, like loans. And so, thinking about the purpose of your relationships and whether or not they support you in these different ways. And if they don't, then, find something else.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that we are more than just graduate students. And sometimes we forget that.
Yes.
And the best way to make it through is by not only us remembering, but by having an anchor to those other aspects of ourselves, typically through other like human relationships that can remind us when we tend to forget.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And so what do our relationships have to do with our professional and social well-being?
The social piece and the professional piece are really intermingled, because you really do need people to ask. You need people to ask your questions of. and not even just ask your questions of, but also to problem solve with. The graduate school environment is not necessarily conducive to like interdependence. It very much rewards independence, and it very much rewards kind of this like do it yourself mentality. And first gen students tend to come from communities that are more interdependent. And so it feels like such a jarring, what we call the jarring juxtaposition, just like trying to navigate what felt like a true value to them, but in an environment that was not rewarding it. And so it needed, we needed other people around us. And like for, the participants also talked about it, just to, yeah, exactly ground yourself, but also help you kind of navigate these professional experiences that are very foreign in some ways. And sometimes they're not, right? Like some students come in and they're like, I know what graduate school is. First gen students are like, I know what research is, but you still have questions, and it can still feel kind of difficult to ask those in like a larger group. And so that competition in grad school with just the other grad students generally can feel in contrast to values that you hold. And so it's really important to having other environments where you can kind of share all of these pieces and ask those questions. Because yeah, your professional environment, it only gets more, not like complicated, but it just gets more intricate as you go.
This perspective or understanding that interdependence is such a necessary part of being a mammal, right? And yet, as mammals in an academic institution in higher ed, that is not something that is valued on our journey, but is necessary for our journey, is wild. Okay, so if relationships are a vital aspect of success in graduate school, but we're not really given any guidance on graduate level relationships when we get here, what is the graduate environment telling us, explicitly, implicitly, about relationships?
I was in a graduate school practicum course, and it was the first class of this with my cohort of other PhD students. And the director of the program came in and he was like, hi, everyone. He did this really beautiful activity that made me feel like he really understood, our values and kind of how we do this. And then he was like, these are all the things that you need to do. He was like, you need to build relationships with your faculty. You need to take courses. You need to do research, and you need to do your own research, but you also need to do research with other faculty, not just in your department, also to your external to your department. He was like, you need to go to conferences. You need to present at conferences. You need to seek out relationships and resources outside of our school and college, because that will help you expand your professional network. And he gave this super long list. And I am sitting there with the like foundation of those grad students that I worked with who were like, ask the questions, Tara. And I was like, okay, like this is the moment. Like this person is telling me, that I need to do all these things. And so I like raise my hand and I ask, could you prioritize some of these? Like, well, let's just make the assumption that I can only focus on two of these things, maybe at a time. Could you tell me what my priority should be? And he was like, they should all be a priority. And I was
Of course.
I was like, yeah, okay. Like, and he's like, no, I'm very serious. Like they should all be a priority. And at that moment, I was like, okay, this is maybe not the person who I need to like ask more questions of about this, because they are telling me something important about how they view what I should be doing with my time. So
Right.
maybe I'll seek out other people to ask that question too. But I think that graduate schools explicitly in their environments are, tell us you have to build strong relationships with faculty. You have to go to professional conferences. You need to do research. You need to do research with your advisor. You need to do research on your own. And it's all these tasks or things that you need to accumulate, accomplishments, and they are like this checkbox, right? Of all these things. And these are the things they like tell you that you must do explicitly. And then implicitly, what is underlying all of these things is that the relationships that you build in these spaces are actually the ones who construct your path, right? They ensure you have research opportunities. So it's all of this stuff that you have to do, but really, if you focus on building relationships with faculty, it doesn't have to be like this checkbox of like, do I have this research? Do I do this? Like, it's more about, investing in the relationships that are around you, because over time, if you have those supports, the pathway will be led for you, right? Like your faculty will be like, you need to apply to a conference, or one of your friends will say, I'm going to this academic conference, or I'm presenting at this thing, like you should do that. And it is so much less about this checklist and so much more about, collaborating with other people. So in the research, a lot of the students would talk about, their advisor as someone who is an all-encompassing support for them. They could say, there are challenges in my family, or I'm balancing these things. And then some would say, like, I haven't heard from my advisor in a month and a half, and I've emailed them 3 times. And it's not like, I try not to place judgment. I try to just be like, then that person is prioritizing different things. And if a student were to come to me to say, like, that's what's happening, I would be like, you got to find somebody else to help answer your questions, or you got to find a way to work with this person. And so find other students who have worked with them and ask them how they work with them, because it's just not, some relationships you must have, and some you're like, I don't really need this, or I can find it somewhere else. And so I think that one of the pieces, as you mentioned before, that interdependence piece, I would say, like, first generation college students in grad school are great at that. Like, they are exceptional at building these networks because they have to, but also because they've had them modeled for so long. And I think that those students, this is what I tell institutions, I'm like, you need these students because they build environments that ensure that ideas and collaboration happen in ways that have never happened before. So you're exploring topics and areas of your discipline that have never been able to be looked at because these students are giving you their experiences and telling you how to do this more interconnectedly. And so it makes it a more conducive environment to success, but it also makes our research better, right? Like, it makes our practice better because people are able to collaborate in ways that the traditional grad environment doesn't necessarily allow. And so I think when I have first gen students talk to me about going into grad school or wanting to choose programs, I'm like, they need you. They need you a lot more than you need them, because first gen students will be successful. They will find a way through. It just might not be the way that they originally thought, but that may actually end up being really beneficial in the long run.
Tara, I love that. I love to hear that first-gen students are gonna find a way, and it's just gonna be through creativity and community and abundance in a way that these institutions don't necessarily know how to lean into. And so, with or without you, a way will be found. And I really appreciate that perspective because I know that things can feel real hard at times throughout these programs of ours. And so I think that is a beautiful reminder. If a grad student were looking to cultivate stronger professional and social relationships, what should they do? Where should they go? How do they start?
If they're a new grad student, new to coming to Michigan or moving here, or is this their first year, I tell them to hyper focus on building relationships with their peers right away. Like, especially if you're in a really intense research place, like, I think that the initial drive is like, I got to make sure I got my classes down. I got to make sure that I'm reading, I'm doing these things. And when I talk to new graduate students, I'm like, those things definitely important. But your relationships are the ones that are, they're the ones that you're going to end up calling when you're trying to figure out how to write this paper. And that beginning time is so intense with relationship building. They do all those introductory, like, socials, like, all this stuff. So, like, use it, like, use that time. And I'll say this now, but, like, deprioritize, like, trying to do super well in your classes in the first, like, week or two, because
Right.
you'll get there. It'll be okay. Like, you'll figure it out, but you might not have the same opportunity to build relationships that you do at the beginning. And so this is different. If I talk to master's students, because they're here for such a short period of time, I tell them to hyper focus on their department or their school and college. I would love for them to get involved with, like, Rackham student government, like the bigger pieces, but I'm like, you're here for 2 years. Like, you need to already be thinking about, like, professional development, not to stress them out, but and the way that you do that is you stay in your department and you start using the college's resources immediately, right? Their career centers, their staff that are program coordinators that are, trying to help students figure that out. Because a lot of master's students will be like, Michigan is so big, I want to do everything. And I'm like, I love that. And I want you to be able to do everything. But you're here for 2 years. So, like, let's make sure that what you came for, if it's a master's degree to get you transitioned to a PhD or a master's degree to get you into a job, that happens at the end of this. And then the other piece that I'll say, if they're interested in, creating these spaces, is if they don't exist, or if the people in the spaces like writing groups or things like that they go to are maybe not aligned with their values, or they don't feel like they can be their full selves, or maybe it doesn't serve the purpose that they need, you can seek out other departments and other areas of the university that might have people who resonate with you more. In our study, I remember a student who was like, there's a writing group that I'm a part of that's with other people in my department, and I'm there. And when I'm there, I'm doing work and I'm asking questions about my topic. I'm very specific. And then there's a writing group that I go to process, to like write, but also to be in community, to like feel out how I'm experiencing my research, right? Like two different spaces, but they were like, that group is just not the group that I can be that in. And it's disappointing, and there can be grief with that because you have a lot of expectations about grad school, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist somewhere. It might just not exist there. And I think that it's important to leave room to process that like grief of like, I wanted this experience to be like this, it isn't, but you have autonomy to either create a space that is like that or to find one that exists. And so it's really, taking the time to meet your classmates, to meet your faculty, and go to all these like weird social things that you do at the beginning of the year, because those are the people that get you through. Like when I think about grad school, I think that I was successful because I had a couple of other students who I could be fully transparent with, that, we served as a mutually beneficial like resource to each other and connection. And that was how I made it through.
It really sounds like what you're saying is you have to find your people, and you have to invest the time to find your people. And I really appreciate you recognizing that the very beginning of your graduate program, you're in sort of like this energetic season where connections and relationships are being built that you don't want to pass up, because a lull sort of sits in where everybody sort of has found their ways and their groove, and it's harder to make those connections afterwards. And I understand getting caught up in the trap of, I really want to do well in my program. And so therefore we think that we should be doing well in classes in the first like month or two. But to do well in one's program means that like you need to make these strong connections. And that needs to be our focus when we first get here, and the rest will come. The work will be there. The work is going to be there, right?
Work will be there.
and so, yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because I felt it when I was at the beginning of my program, but I don't, if I had sort of been able to articulate that that's what I was doing, that's what needed to be done, I think I would have done it better.
Yeah. And I mean, you figure it out. If you spend the first 3 weeks just trying to find your classes and can't engage because there are too many other things that are brand new, that are just overwhelming, it's like, it doesn't mean it's over, that you won't be able to find it. It just is a reprioritization around what it means to be successful and what tools you need to be successful. Because I think immediately you're like, I got to do all my classes, I got to do my reading. And it's like, those things are important, but that beginning, like the people are the ones that are going to make sure that you get through. It's not going to be you getting straight A's. It's going to be people who are the ones that are there to help you through it. And then from that investment, you will get better grades, or you'll engage more in the content. But it feels so like backwards, I think, especially if you're at maybe a more intense institution than you were at in your undergrad.
Yeah.
You can feel like you have something to prove. Those relationships, that's where you will find the most, when you invest in those relationships and that community that you build. That will be the thing that will make sure that you are doing well. Although sometimes it can feel like that's not really what's prioritized actually by a program, but internally you have to like prioritize it.
Yeah, definitely. And my hope is that people will hear this and know that, because I know it can feel scary. Like, I feel like I'm not doing the right things. But if you follow what feels right, or what feels maybe good rather than what feels right, I think that perhaps we can get to the ultimate goal in a more easeful way, is my hope. Terra, to what extent is it our responsibility to make sure that we get the things that we need to be successful? And to what extent is it the institution's responsibility to make sure that its students get the things that they need to be successful in grad school?
It's so hard for me not to be like, it's the institution. I mean, it's definitely still the individual's responsibility because you choose an institution, and if they don't have the supports you need, you can decide to either stay at that institution and figure out how to either build those or find that support, or you can go somewhere else that maybe has a better kind of system of support. But the institution creates these environments, right? They create graduate school and that kind of stuff. And they know the students that are coming. Like they know your grades, they know what your research experience was, they know who you are. And so we know what resources, from an institution perspective, we know what resources students have. And there is a scholar, Anthony Jack, who always says for undergrad students, he says, a lot of times we extend an invitation without preparing for the occasion. And it's this idea that we admit students that we know have some challenges in some areas, some really exceptional talents in others, and we do not prepare for when they actually get here to make sure that they're successful. It's really placed on them. And I feel personally and, professionally that it is the responsibility of graduate schools to address these gaps. One of the gaps that I can kind of see that comes up in this area of support is that a lot of first gen college students who are now in graduate school tend to concentrate or study something that is really close to who they are or their personal background. And it is an incredible service of these first gen students to focus on these things because they provide that nuance in research, right? And they also draw attention to reciprocity of communities and all these really incredible ways of making our institution better. But our institutions are very underprepared for how to help these students process the experience of studying something that is so close to who you are while being at an institution or looking at research that is telling them things from a deficit lens, right? Like I studied first generation college students, and that was so powerful and incredible. But half of my work, I had to do a literature review, which means, going all the way back to whenever we started saying first gen and looking at what they've been saying about first gens for the last like 30 years. And most of it at the beginning is just like, these students, we don't know. They will survive or they won't. And it's hard. It's hard to read that. And so going into graduate school, if students are studying topics that are close to who they are or just, studying in general, graduate school it puts you through it, right? Like it challenges you intellectually. It challenges your understanding of your own capacity, your energy, what you value, like why you value it. It's a whole bunch of internal stuff that has not a lot to do with, like your actual reading academics, right? Those pieces. And so I think that if you are studying these things, it's really important to know that like, if the school doesn't provide those supports, that you need them anyway. And it will be an investment in that over time. And so even if students aren't studying something that's personal to them, graduate school will still be difficult. The experience will still have a lot of challenges into it. And my advisor used to say to us, like at the very kind of beginning, is she would say, find the communities that like pull you back, right? Like when you are deep in the research and you are like, you're at the library for hours, like you're in it. Find the communities of people or people who can pull you back and be like, you're a whole person, like let's come back, and still remind you to rest, remind you to like take care of yourself. But also, that can maybe be home communities, it can be other people, but also you need people who you can be like angry with, right? Like that you can process the experience of graduate school, what you're studying, that can be there with you through it. My advisor used to tell us, like, find your co-conspirators. So find people at the institution who are thinking about things in similar ways as you, or that they're talking about things in that you find interesting. And when I talk to grad students, I'm like, you can't wait for someone to provide it for you because you're already here. Like you are at graduate school right now. And it is one of the most powerful experiences that you can have to learn about yourself, to learn about some really, really interesting topics, and to like really set you up professionally for wherever endeavor you want to go to. But you cannot wait for the institution to provide you the supports that you need because it might never come. And you're here now, right? Like, so the students who are listening to this podcast, right? Like you're either incoming or you're already, here in this experience. There are supports here. There's a lot that you can use, but it's that idea of expecting your graduate school, your units, your departments to provide you the support that you need. But if they don't, then you also have like my co-conspirators in my grad program. We would like message the faculty and be like, hey, this process that you've created is not working. We would like more clarity on it. And so they would like join in that like advocacy work because it needed to get done. I needed to write my preliminary exam, but I was confused about something. And so were my other, graduate students. And so it is the responsibility of the institution because we know what experiences students have before they get here and we know what support that they might need. But because students are already here, it is also your responsibility. Because if you wait for them to do it for you, you'll be waiting a long time and you don't have a lot of time. It goes back to the question, what do you want to spend your energy on, right? Like, what do you want to be, what energy do you have and what do you want to spend it on? And then be very protective of that. And so I think graduate schools are getting better. I think, they're forming more areas to support first-gen students in grad school, but it's still a developing area. And so there's a lot of opportunity. That support, it's around you. It's like around the student. It's just, you have to kind of seek it out, which it's like, should you have to seek it out? Like, should it be that difficult? I don't know if it should be that difficult, like probably not, but it is, or you might find it to be difficult. And so it's just like, how do we navigate that? And how do we get you to a place where you are your most successful self in the context that you exist in for however long you want to be here? Obviously, I want you to graduate, but I'm here with students being like, let's get you through this experience and get as much from it as you can while really respecting yourself as a whole person, which is, maybe not something the institutions will do because they don't have that same priorities. They don't think about you as an individual. They think about everybody.
Okay. Ask the question. That's what I'm hearing. Ask the question. Okay. Speaking of support, what resources can you share with us that can help us better cultivate and navigate our grad school relationships?
So I think that the book that we wrote is useful in a lot of ways for students who are first gen. It's not written for student, right? Like it's a lot of feedback and a lot of information for departments and stuff to say like, you need to be creating these environments. But at the end of the day, it is still the participants' experiences of being first gen in grad school. And so I think that the information is still very, very useful to that because it's really powerful to read other people's stories and you see your story reflected in that, right? Even if the research isn't what you're studying, because it is definitely like it's a research study, I think that the book is useful. And then I would say, other resources, I think Rackham has really good professional development opportunities or professional development kind of workshops and things like that. And so I would say, use those and use those early. I was looking on the website earlier and they have all these grad 101, like workshops. Like, that's great. Like, you should use that now and in the future. And because students are kind of tend to be like a particular type of person, I would say, get the information you need that's relevant to you at this current moment. And like, don't worry about a whole bunch of information that you might need later. Cause I feel like for me, I would be like, let me watch all the grad 101 workshops. And it's like, maybe just like watch one of them and then, take some time looking for student organizations or going to socials. And at the end of the day, for undergrad or grad students, like in this experience, you need one person who you can ask questions to, or who can help you kind of think through questions to ask people. And so, using the resources that are provided to you in your department, the socials, going to the research talks and stuff like that, and mingling with your faculty is really powerful. And now I'm sounding like that list of all the things you can do. But don't think about it as like, I'm doing as much as possible or, trying to do as much as possible. Think about it as like, how valuable is this really going to be for me? Like, if I go to every social, if I'm really burnt out on all that, like, I'm not going to get anything from that, or like, I'm not going to be able to build the relationships I want to. And so it's really about protecting your energy and protecting everything, to make sure that you're keeping yourself well, while also investing in the relationships that are around you. There are a lot of department specific things like advanced stuff that I would advise students to use. Same with career centers that are in their schools and colleges. And I would tell them to like maybe start doing those things earlier, like just going to a career center and being like, hey, I'm a first generation college student and I'm in grad school and I want to make sure I get a job after this master's degree. Like, what do I do? And that staff member, when you start building a relationship with them, they get invested in your journey. And so over time, there are staff members who like email me and they're like, I want to go to the first gen graduation because I want to see this graduate student like walk across the stage because I was in a appointment with them for, once a month for the entire second year to try and find them a job, because there are people who are really, really invested in wanting to support grad students. And you just got to find them. And if you don't find them explicitly, talk to other students and see who they find to be helpful. But I think there's a lot of power in those spaces that we have, and a lot of opportunity for students to create new spaces that function the way that they want them to function. I would love if a grad student came up to me and was like, I want to start a first gen writing group, because it gives my little research PhD student heart just so many good feelings. But I don't create something like that because I have no students come to me and say, this is what I want. But there are so many opportunities to do and build those things. And so I think, using the department resources are really, really important, but it's all about the relationships.
Got it. Oh, Terra, thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to add before we go?
I spend a lot of time talking about, challenges and barriers and things like that. But first generation college students, view the world and view opportunities in such an incredible way, because frequently they use these experiences to give back to their communities. And I think that that is not something that should ever be, forgotten. For the student, it's who is this really about? Who's this really for? And to emphasize to colleges and universities, that is such an important perspective. First generation college students bring so many incredible strengths with them. And all we have to do is set them up for the best success that they can. And then they're able to use those strengths without having to try and figure out how many credits they need. It's then they have the capacity to use those strengths in the ways that would not only benefit them, but benefit their communities, benefit the university overall. So there are a lot of strengths that first gen students in graduate school bring. And I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. Thank you for that highlighting. It's always an important reminder. Terra, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this conversation. I am truly grateful to have been able to spend this moment with you. Thank you for sharing not just your research, but also your experience, your expertise, your stories with us. Yeah.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Here are a few takeaways from this episode for your well-being journey. 1. Relationships are the most critical factor that helps determine not just if you get through grad school, but how you do so. So, focus on investing in strong and diverse relationships, and all of those boxes that need to get checked during your time here will end up getting checked off. 2. Don't wait for the things that you need to just come to you. Even though it would be wonderful for the institution to provide us with the things that we need, at the end of the day, it is our responsibility to get ourselves through this experience. Which leads me to number 3. Ask the questions. Ask for what you need. Ask for what you're not sure about. Your questions are valid, and you're not supposed to guess at the answer, even if it may seem like that at times. Don't hold yourself back. You deserve to have a very clear understanding of this program and this process. You can check out our website for all of the resources Terra mentioned and more at rackham.umich.edu/Gradwell. You can reach out to Terra with any questions you have at terrajm@umich.edu. You can contact us about the podcast at rackhampdeworkshops@umich.edu. And you can join us next time when I chat with Dr. Vanessa Thompson about the importance of belonging in grad school. See you then. Hey, hardworking grad student. Thank you for tuning into Gradwell. I hope you can take something away from this episode with you. If you like what you heard, be sure to write a review, like, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For more information, check us out on social at UMich Grad School.